Welcome to the Action Debate. This is a show which unravels cross-cutting issues that trigger new imaginations and alternative ways of building a green and sustainable planet. And today we are discussing the topic, urban development and wetland conservation, the role of media in bridging the continuum. To help us unpack this topic, we are joined by Mr. Francis Manuel. He is the project's director and town planner at Migen Infrastructure Development and Town Planning Consultants. We also have Mr. Christopher Gowrie from Community Water Alliance and Mr. Jabulani Chikomwe, a media expert. So to start our conversation, I will start with you, Mr. Manuel. Can you give us a brief overview of the nexus between urban development and wetland conservation in Zimbabwe?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Makore. When we are looking at urban development and its link to wetland conservation, I think it's critical for us to first start by defining what is urban development. So in general, when we are looking at urban development, it has got a close relationship with population growth, or what would say urban expansion, whereby the role of urban development or urban developers is to provide on-site and off-site infrastructure, meaning to say we need to provide what we call serviced stands or serviced land, where there is water, sewer, and roads in place, as well as the supporting ancillary facilities, be it shopping centers, churches, as well as recreational space for people. And then when we are looking at wetlands, that one is a highly emotive area to define or explain, in the sense that, for example, in Harare, the whole of Harare is actually sitting on a wetland. So what is a wetland? A wetland is an area or a space that has got a high water table, in which if you are to dig a few meters down, you easily find water. But there are different types of wetlands. Some are classified as marshes, we've got bogs, depending on the location or the area that we are at. So just to explain in brief the relationship or the link that is there between urban development and wetland conservation. As I have already alluded to say, for example, in Harare, 80% of the land in Harare, we are sitting on a wetland. So, as the population is growing, there is great demand for space to set up housing, to set up the supporting ancillary facilities to support human survival. So, the challenge now, or in terms of the relationship, is that the wetland ecosystem is now competing with the growing women population. So basically, that is the relationship that is there.
As you have just rightly put it, that issues to do with wetlands is a very emotive, but he also highlighted a critical area to say population is increasing. So there is now competing needs. So I want to come to you, Mr. Gowrie. Community Water Alliance has been doing a lot in terms of advocating for water conservation of wetlands. Now, looking at the mounting climate crisis, it makes urgent the need for the protection of delicate ecosystems, which include wetlands. But looking at it, despite the importance of conserving these delicate ecosystems, the exploitation of wetlands, particularly in urban Zimbabwe, is on the rise through property development. What do you think can be done to curtail this infamous trend?
Okay, thank you very much. I think the first thing that we need to do is to have a wetlands map for urban areas with coordinates or demarcations, so that when these guys who are in urban planning, they should know where the wetland starts and those demarcations are very, very critical, and they are very important. Recently, the government published the Zimbabwe wetlands map. Yeah, it covers the majority of the areas with wetlands, but it does not, it's not conclusive in terms of stakeholder input. There's no stakeholder input that was captured during the gazetting of the wetlands map. So I think it's very, very important that we also need to include stakeholders whenever we are coming up with documents like that. There's also need to declare gazetted wetlands as ecologically sensitive areas, so that no one is allowed to tamper with those areas. For example, some may need to practice farming around wetlands because due to climate change, they believe that on wetlands they are always wet and they can harvest better. So it's very, very important that if there is a declaration that these areas are ecologically sensitive and they should not be tampered with, it means those who are practicing urban cultivation, they won't do that, as well as those who are also constructing on wetlands, they will be restricted based on that. So there's need for that so that we protect the wetlands. There's also need to synchronize the wetlands map with the planning processes of the urban local authorities. As they plan, they should know the demarcations of where the wetlands are and where are they ending, so that we preserve those wetlands. That's one other point which is very, very important. We also need to engage citizens so that they understand why we are saying we need to preserve wetlands. They also need to understand the link between wetlands and water service provision. They should know that as residents, so that whenever they see someone doing any activity around a wetland, they will be able to defend based on informed basis. Those are some of the things that we think needs to be done in order to preserve wetlands. We can also form some community-based organizations, CBOs, who will be looking after wetlands adjacent to where they reside. So those CBOs can be monitors who can raise red flags whenever someone is trying to construct on a wetland or someone is trying to farm on a wetland. Those are some of the issues that we think can help in terms of preserving wetlands.
Very critical insights coming out, and I understand, Mr. Manuel, you said almost 80% of Harare is sitting on wetlands. But now Mr. Gore is raising a point that we need to make sure that we have a wetland map. Then we have a sort of like a declaration to make sure that we desist from doing activities which may affect them in a negative way. But I understand from my knowledge is that when the city of Harare was planned, it was supposed to accommodate maybe a population of 500,000 people. But looking today, the city is accommodating close to 3 million people. And I think it leaves a lot of questions. I think it raised a lot of debate. And I think it will lead us to another debate the other day. But I want to come to you, Mr. Manuel. Mm-hmm. I know nowadays we have a lot of property developers who are emerging. Mm-hmm. In your view, do you think these property developers have adequate knowledge about the importance of wetlands in an urban ecosystem?
Okay. Right, going back to the definition of what we call urban development, or basically town planning. What is town planning? What is urban development? Right, when we are doing urban development, we're supposed to have a town planner in place. We are supposed to have an environmental scientist in place. We are supposed to be having the engineers in their different domains, be it the civil and other types of engineers and the land surveyors. And then, during the process, you then consult with the local authority. For example, in the case of Harare, we've got the city of Harare, whereby you'll be consulting with them in terms of how we are going to carry out what? Development. But if you look at today, there are like I said, it's an emotive and a very sensitive issue. We have the emergence of informal, if I would say, unprofessional land developers that are in place, whereby, coming back to our issue on wetlands, they don't understand, or they do not have an understanding of the importance of preserving or conserving what? Wetlands. So we have developers who are qualified to carry out the projects. And then, as of now, we have seen the emergence of what I would say briefcase developers, or some were saying handbag developers. They just sprout overnight because maybe they view the land or the space that is there as low-hanging fruits, and then they use certain powers that they may have to benefit themselves. So we have, just to coming back to your question, we have formal developers who have qualified or personnel, or who have the necessary expertise, and then we have overnight developers who are just taking advantage of maybe the confusion that may be within city of Harare or within the process of urban development as of today.
Now that we know we have two groups of proper developers, those who are formal and have the expertise, and those who are informal, the briefcase guys. I want to come to Mr. Chikongwe. You as a media expert, now that we understand that we have two groups of proper developers, and it seems these informal guys are the ones who are going after these wetlands, which are very, very critical, the ecological lands, the ecological kidneys. Mr. Chikongwe, what role now can the media play in raising public consciousness on wetland conservation?
Thank you very much. I'd just like to acknowledge, the previous speaker, in particular, Mr. Gore, in terms of highlighting also what citizens can do in terms of preserving wetlands. Now, coming to your question, I think, Mr. Makore, the issue is that we need to also unpack to say what is the media, in essence, and the media is basically a watchdog to protect public interest against malpractice and create public awareness. And when it then comes to issues such as wetlands conservation, it then becomes critical that public awareness is raised in terms of educating the public on the role that wetlands play in their day-to-day lives, and how lack of preservation leads to detrimental and far-reaching consequences for not only the current but future generations. I think we are also aware of the recent developments with regards to the Kariba Dam, where water has reached critical levels due to the fact that water hasn't started streaming in, and that has now had to have the effect of being cut off. And so, if we were conserving our wetlands as we should, because they perform many functions, Mr. Makwe, just to highlight a few, that for humans and the natural environment, they act as purifiers in freshwater systems, and the wetlands' natural ability to attenuate flows and reduce the concentration of potentially harmful constituents can also be enhanced in constructed wetland systems to assist in water treatment. We see that the city of Harare has got a perennial problem of water treatment chemicals. If we were conserving our wetlands, then certain harmful substances that find their ways into our water bodies would not exist, and that would be able to cut down on the water treatment chemicals that build that city of Harare is constantly faced with, and that then becomes a challenge. So these are the issues that, unfortunately, when the media speaks on issues to do with property development, issues to do with violations on wetlands, they do not unpack to say how does it impact on everyone's day-to-day lives. And I think that is the role that we should be playing going forward.
So in other words, you're saying the media is not doing enough in terms of unpacking the nexus between urban development and wetland conservation, Ms. Babu.
That's correct, Mr. Bakore. And this is, in my experience and opinion, we really haven't done enough to highlight the negative effects and the reports that we see, on corrupt practices that will have arisen in the process of land sales, without highlighting the detrimental effects that the developments pose, then becomes a challenge, because when you then look at the fact that most of Harare is looking at in the urban areas is concentrating on bold drilling, that also has another effect, detrimentally on the ability for us to be able to conserve our environment and also our water bodies. So I think the media would do way much more in highlighting the corrupt practices, because I think Mr. Frank has highlighted the issue that some of these are unregistered or informal entities. For example, there is actually an issue that I believe the permanent secretary for Harare Metropolitan area is seized with. There's a wetland that has been sold off. It's crossing from Enterprise into Blue Road and then into the Grange. And apparently the city of Harare has sold this to a developer to construct low-density residential stands, and but we don't see any major media house speaking to this issue. So I think we can do much more in terms of highlighting these instances.
The media can do much more, and I think that's the good thing with this show. I think we'll be trying to bridge that gap. I want to come to you, Mr. Gore. In your view, do you think the government is doing enough to conserve wetlands?
Yeah, let me start by what the government has done so far. Firstly, they've managed to produce the National Wetlands Guidelines and also the Zimbabwe Wetlands Map, and currently they are in the process of reviewing the EMA Act. But we can now debate on whether that is enough in terms of preserving wetlands or not. But currently that is what is there, that has been done by the government. When it comes to guidelines, we need to understand that in Zimbabwe, we are good at formulating policies, but the implementation part is a big challenge. So in Zimbabwe, we formulate very good policies that may protect or preserve those wetlands, but the implementation part, and as you know that we have three arms of the state. That is the parliament, which formulates law, and once the law is formulated, then the judiciary is there to interpret the law. Then the executive arm is the one that is responsible for the implementation part. So what we need to focus on is to make sure that the executive arm is doing its, or is taking its responsibility to make sure that whenever there are laws that have been formulated with regards to wetlands issues, they need to make sure that there's law enforcement around those areas so that people cannot continue to deplete our precious natural water resource.
Taking it from your point, I think it is the responsibility of the local authorities to make sure that they operationalize some of these policies. Policies we do have, like Mr. Gori has mentioned. I want to come to you, Mr. Emmanuel. What can the local authorities and you, the proper developers in particular, can do to ensure effective conservation of wetlands?
Here we are looking at the role of the local authority and land developers in terms of wetland conservation. I think some of the issues have been raised already. When we are looking at the local authority, it plays a statutory role or a regulatory role in terms of monitoring, be it land developers, as well as people who are the custodians of those wetlands. So, on the part of local authority, I remember you've said that we have the wetlands map, but it's not in sync with what we call local plans. So I think more needs to be done by local authorities in terms of synchronizing the Harare Wetlands Map or the National Wetlands Map which is in place with be it local development plans or local subject plans for certain regions. I think in Harare, city of Harare has gone a milestone in terms of trying to synchronize the Harare wetlands map and their local plans. Right? We have the Monaville wetland, we have got the Cleveland wetland, and then the Marimba River corridor. I think much has been done on the media side in terms of awareness campaigns or informing citizens in terms of the importance of protecting such areas. So in terms of the local plans or the zoning within our local authorities, those areas are reserved as what? As open spaces. You cannot easily tamper or propose to carry out development on such pieces of what? Of land. Was they recognize the importance of the Cleveland, which is the Donnybrook area, where our Mukuisi River emanates from. The same with the Marimba corridor, and as of now, the Monaville reservation site. Remember, as a country, I think we are a signatory to the Ramsar Convention of 1971, which calls for the sustainable management and conservation of what? Okay. Of these wetlands. So, in terms of the local authority, it's recognizing the importance of conserving such, but more needs to be what? To be done so that there is a continued monitoring and observation of those who violate the importance of these fragile ecosystems. And then on the part of developers, like I said, we've got informal and the other part, which is more formal and is very much aware of the existence of statutory instruments or bylaws that have been set by policymakers, the executive board he was referring to. So, the experts who have been trained to carry out land development, I think the majority are upholding or they consult with the local authorities and they respect the decisions that will be made by what? By local authorities, not to tamper with what? Wetlands. At the same time, on the part of developers, gentlemen, remember, you are saying the population of Harare has now gone beyond or has reached 3 million. We don't have more space in Harare. So what can we do or what can we propose as developers? Instead of going horizontal in terms of urban development, maybe we can go upwards, right? We build going upwards. And on the classification of wetlands, we have what we call passive and active wetlands, right? What do we mean when we say passive and active wetlands? When you look at Harare Gardens, right, and other recreational parks that are in Harare, they are used for recreational what? Activities. There isn't much in terms of what we can refer to as disturbances caused by on the anthropogenic hydrology, whereby we build more pavements, more structures that disturb built infiltration or the sponge effect, which is carried out by what? By wetlands. And then we have active open spaces, but not a great percentage of the land in Harare is being tampered with when we look at the active what? Open spaces. So I think more research needs to be done on the part of the local authorities as well as on the part of developers in terms of how best we can maintain the function. Because I think the major issue is on maintaining the functionality of wetlands to people in terms of its role it plays, right? At the same time, we need to bear in mind that the population is what? Is growing. There's going to be more demand for what? For space. So I think the local authorities and the developers should closely work together, come up with innovative ideas to preserve the functions of wetlands, at the same time not doing away with the importance of wetlands in society.
One thing coming out it shows there is a connection despite our different realities. So I want to throw this question to you, which Mr. Gore, I would request you answer in less than 30 seconds because of our time. Now that we know that despite our different realities, what role can other stakeholders play to ensure there is a shared vision towards the conservation of wetlands in Zimbabwe?
Okay, I think there is need for deliberate process for consensus building, so that we have a shared position. Because as we speak right now, some say we need to conserve wetlands, and we say we need to preserve wetlands. There are two different things. Mm-hmm. Conserving means we can use those wetlands, but use them wisely. Mm-hmm. But in terms of preserving, we are saying let's leave them as they are, so that they continue to play their role of recharging streams, of flood attenuation, reducing floods. They also absorb carbon dioxide more than trees do. Mm-hmm. So in terms of climate change that is affecting the globe, if our wetlands are intact, they absorb more carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas, which is causing global warming. So if they are allowed to perform their role, it means the issue of climate change will be something else in terms of the impact that is affecting us now. So those wetlands should be preserved. So in terms of the issue of preserving and conserving, we need to reach consensus so that we come up with a position which then informs the laws, which then informs the policies. And I think if we work like that, we can come up with something tangible in terms of preserving wetlands.
Definitely.
Yes.
The issue of consensus, I think the media plays a very, very critical role as well in terms of raising or highlighting the agenda. I want to come to you, Mr. Chikomwe. In your view, what can the media do to ensure there is commitment and action towards the conservation of wetlands?
I think there's a need to accelerate and really hammer home the detrimental effects that occur where we do not preserve our environment, such as deforestation, lack of biodiversity, and increased water pollution. I think the media now also equally, needs to also police itself in terms of how it conducts its business, because we see in some instances whereby people implicated in cases can actually pay off journalists in order to kill certain stories. So the scourge of brown envelopes in the media houses needs to be looked into and done away with. And then when the way the media continues to play its advocacy role in terms of educating the public, we then can be able to better inform citizens to carry out, nowadays, there's more citizen journalism than there is, the traditional form. And so what we then, my colleague also spoke on it, we need citizens to be out there to be able to bring home certain issues where violations have taken place, we've got social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, that people can use, and which are now, much more a more prevalent form of a source of information for the citizens at large than the traditional media houses. So I think more could be done in terms of empowering by the media, in terms of empowering citizens so that they can be able to carry out a watchdog role in their own spaces.
This is a very, very interesting discussion, viewers, and we would also welcome your comments. Please feel free to make sure that your views can also be heard. So in closing this show, I want to give you, all the panelists, a maximum of 30 seconds to give your parting words. I'll start with you, Mr. Manuel.
Okay, my parting words are on wetland conservation or preservation. I think there is more. There is need for more investment in scientific approaches as well as policy approaches, so that both the ecosystem as well as the growing population can benefit, so that we can live in harmony as people as well as with the environment.
Mr. Go.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say it's everyone's responsibility to preserve wetlands, because wetlands, they play a critical role or a pivotal role in terms of water service provision, of which water is life. We can't survive without water. So we need to make sure that we preserve wetlands so that our constitutional right, which is on Section 77 of the Constitution, that is the human right to water, is protected.
Mr. Jablan.
Thank you. I think I cannot emphasize enough the need for more advocacy on the detrimental effects of wetlands construction on wetlands, and so the need for us to then try and conserve our wetlands. I think that is a role that we as the media should continue to amplify the voice for, so that we can have these campaigns even in schools, because it's important to start early and then carry through the entire value chain, so that people are made aware of the need and why it is important for us to conserve our wetlands.
At this point, allow me to thank all the wonderful panelists. Until we meet again, let's think and act green. Thank you.